Friends, I'm Rabbi Richard Block, Senior Rabbi of the Temple Tifereth Israel, and it's my sad privilege this morning to officiate at our service as we mourn the death, but also celebrate the life of Jim Rubin. In his sorrow, Job cried out, Adonai Natan v'Adonai lakach, Yehi Shem Adonai Mevarach. God has given, God has taken away. Blessed be the name of God. An ancient people, we are well acquainted with grief and with the valley of shadows. Death and sorrow are not strangers to us. Yet the centuries have taught us that a good name endures beyond the grave and that there is strength in faith. With Job we say, Adonai Natan, God, you have given. You gave us Jim, a loved one who will not be forgotten. For all that was good and enduring in Jim's life, we offer the deepest thanks of our hearts. Adonai lakach, God, you have taken away. We pray for the strength to turn sorrowing hearts into an altar of trust, before which we acknowledge your sovereignty and love, as now we say, Yehi Shem Adonai Mevarach. Blessed is the name of God, now and forever. Death has taken our beloved Jim. Our friends grieve in their darkened world. In their silence there is lamentation. In their tears there is loneliness. In their sorrow may they find the presence of loving friends. Hear them, O God, be with them. For Jim's love that united us in life and which death cannot sever, for his companionship that was shared along life's path and which continues through the tenderness of memory, for the gifts of his heart and mind that brought joy and happiness and is now a precious remembrance. For all these and more, we give our thanks to God. In this time of loss, we listen to the voice of our sacred scriptures that brings us the ancient yet ever new message of God's nearness. It tells us of our kinship with the Creator, in light as in darkness, in joy as in sorrow, in life as in death. Adonai, who may abide in your house, who may dwell in your holy mountain, those who are upright, who do justly, who speak the truth within their hearts, who do not slander others or wrong them or bring shame upon them, who scorn the lawless but honor those who revere God, who give their word and come what may do not retract, those who do not exploit others, who do not take bribes. Those who live in this way shall never be shaken. These are the beautiful Hebrew words of the 23rd Psalm. Adonai ro'i lo eksar, benodeshe yarbitzeni, al me menuchot yenachaleni, nafshi shovev yancheni v'magle tzedek lema'an shemo, gam ki elech begates al mavet lo irara, ki ata imadi, shivtecha umishantecha hema yenachamuni. Ta'aroch lefanai shulchan neged sorarai, Tishanta v'shemen roshi kosi revaya, ach tov v'chesed yirdefuni kol yemei chayai, v'shavti b'veit Adonai le'orech yamim. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He maketh me to lie down in green pastures. He leadeth me beside the still waters. He restoreth my soul. You're welcome to join me. He guideth me in straight paths for his name's sake. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for thou art with me. Thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. Thou preparest a table before me in the presence of mine enemies. Thou hast anointed my head with oil, my cup runneth over. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I shall dwell in the house of the Lord forever. In Psalm 90, we read these words. O God, you have been our refuge in every generation. Before the mountains came into being, before you brought forth the earth and the world, from eternity to eternity, you are God. You return us to dust. You decree, return you mortals, for in your sight 1,000 years are as yesterday when it is past, as a watch in the night. You engulf us in sleep. We are like grass that renews itself. At daybreak it flourishes anew. At dusk it withers and dries up. The span of our life is 80 years and 10, or given strength 80 years. But the best of those years have trouble and sorrow. They pass by speedily, and we are in darkness. Teach us, therefore, so to number our days that we may attain a heart of wisdom. Turn to us, O God. Show mercy to your servants. Satisfy us at daybreak with your steadfast love, that we may sing for joy all our days. Let your deeds be seen by your servants, your glory by their children. May your favor, O God, be upon us. Establish the work of our hands, that it may long endure. And in the book of Ecclesiastes, we read these words of wisdom. For everything there is a season, a time for every experience under heaven, a time to be born and a time to die, a time to plant and a time to uproot what is planted, a time to tear down and a time to build up, a time to weep and a time to laugh, a time to grieve and a time to dance, a time to throw stones and a time to gather stones, a time to embrace and a time to refrain from embracing, a time to seek and a time to lose, a time to keep and a time to discard, a time to tear and a time to sow, a time to keep silence and a time to speak. As I'm sure many of you know, this is the time to speak. This is the time when we find room in our hearts, along with grief, for gratitude, and offer words of appreciation and respect as we must part from the physical presence of one who was so important in the lives of so many. And so we gather today with sadness indeed, but also with appreciation and recognition of a life well lived. There's much to be said about Jim, and we will hear from his 4 children, 2 by birth and 2 by marriage, in a few minutes. But it boils down to this: Jim was all about love. The love he had for and gave to others so abundantly, the love he received so universally from so many. Jim was born in New York in 1935. He spent his early years in Mount Vernon. He attended public schools. He had a middle-class upbringing. He did not have a life of privilege. He attended first the University of Toledo, subsequently served in the Army, and ultimately graduated from Western Reserve with a degree in marketing. Jim paid his way through college with a series of humble jobs, including delivering clothing for a dry cleaner and changing tires at Sears. After graduation, he went to work for his brother-in-law selling homes in Chicago, and later relocated to Cleveland, where he worked at Developers Diversified and then enjoyed a successful career in real estate development. Jim was outgoing and sociable and athletic, with a radiant smile, and he was fun and kind, with a warm, disarming sense of humor. He loved telling jokes. He was smart, intuitive, and witty, creative and artistic, and well organized. He had what might be called a salesman's personality, although he could be laid back and relaxed at home. He enjoyed the company of his many friends and vice versa, and he adored his children and grandchildren and enjoyed nothing more than spending time with them. And he became a father figure to others, including the brother of Michael's best friend in childhood who lost his own father young, and he was Uncle Jim to many. Jim and Janice married in 1984 after the death of his first wife, Charlotte, and they enjoyed a wonderful 33 years together. Janice had been divorced for some years before they met. She went on a trip to Israel and placed a note in a crevice in the Western Wall in Jerusalem saying, "A husband, please." And 2 weeks later they met through his twin sister Joan, who was selling Janice's home. He came over to Janice's to visit with Joan, and the rest, as they say, is history. I asked Janice what attracted her to Jim, and she said he was tall and handsome and charming and funny and swept her off her feet. And as Jim put it, in later years, after Janice's fateful trip to Israel, he'd been off the wall ever since. and he called meeting her the best real estate deal he'd ever done, and said he had been put in escrow. Jim loved life, and he and Janice traveled the world together to such places as Vietnam and Australia, South Africa, Asia, the Baltics, twice to Israel, and other places. They enjoyed dancing and parties and friends and golf on trips and at Beechwood. I'm told that in his golfing career, Jim had 6 holes in one. Most of us would pray for one in a lifetime. And on one of those, I think they said on number 3 at Beachmont, he once won a BMW, and he put on a license plate that said, "I won it." Jim was a good and loyal friend. He organized golf outings with his buddies and weekly boys' nights out. And when a friend was sick, he would go the extra mile, making time to visit, sitting and talking and making them laugh. He had a calming influence on people. And when he himself was hospitalized recently during the sudden and devastating illness that took his life, he managed to maintain his sense of humor. As you know, he was quite tall, 6'4", but when a nurse in the hospital asked what he'd done for a living, he answered, "A jockey." It is a comfort that his suffering was not protracted and that he's now at peace. He was quietly charitable. He loved our temple and enjoyed especially attending High Holy Day services there. We missed him in these recent days, and he will surely be missed by so many friends and family alike. Zecher Tzadik Livracha. May the memory of this righteous man always be a blessing. Jim is survived by his wife Janice, their children Michael and Elizabeth, Jamie and Jill, grandchildren Lucas, Natalie, and Juliet. I'm honored to call upon the children. First, Elizabeth.
So being up here is one of the most difficult things I've ever done. What's not difficult is to speak about the love and admiration I have for my father, my beautiful, sweet, funny father. They don't make men like my father. He was my hero. He always had his arms around me no matter where in the world I was. He made sure wherever I was in the world, I was safe and felt loved. I lost my mom at 17, and until now, that was the most heartbreaking thing that ever happened to me. It was a defining moment, being a teenager, on the cusp of womanhood, and I was suddenly lost. Who would be there to help me in those sensitive, caring, motherly ways? My father, who ended up taking on that complex job by default, trying to balance the unrealistic role as both father and mother to me. He was scared, overwhelmed, grieving himself, but he rose to the occasion. Over the years, I called him every time I would have needed my mom. He got all the tears, the PMS angst, hormonal raging, boy problems, and then later the business questions, the mother questions, the expat worries, all while trying to navigate being the dad as well. Honestly, he was better at being the dad. He couldn't handle any of my heartbreak. It tore him up. But I was ever so grateful for him for trying to be what I needed most from that loss. The truth is, as a father, he was amazing. There are so many gifts my father gave me. The first is that my father was a man of integrity and generosity. He never had to step on or over anyone to get ahead. He refused to do so. So many men don't have this integrity, the empathy for others. Money was never more important than operating with integrity, and I'm proud to say I inherited that gene from him and to live my life the same way. Second, his immense generosity touched all he knew and loved. He loved to give, to help. He was so happy to give in so many ways, never expecting anything back. His joy came from others' joy. He was humble that way. I thank my father for the gift of a strong professional work ethic. When all my friends were at the football games in high school, I was working at the pizza parlor, waitressing. When it came time to drive, while so many got jazzy sports cars, my father bought my brother and I a used car to share. Nothing was ever given to him. He worked for everything he had, and he wanted the same for us. I have been blessed with a creative passion from my mother and a solid work ethic from my dad, and I've had an extraordinary career which I loved, and I owe so much of that to my father. I have a lot of it was to thank my dad. He never spoiled us until we were adults, and it truly made me appreciate my father and all he did in his life. And I thank my father for being the best grandpa to Lucas. When Lucas came into the world, my dad was the first one in the hospital room and the last one to leave. And the joy and spark that I saw that filled my father's heart filled my heart. I also saw that I had given birth to his biggest fan. Lucas laughed at every joke from the age of 3. I mean, full belly laughs. It was beautiful, and I'll never forget when Lucas was 11 or 12 and my dad told him his first dirty joke. My dad's eyes lit up like this was big. This was a rite of passage. And then Lucas's eyes lit up, and then it happened. And it was pure, unadulterated laughter. They were such a lovely pair, sharing their long legs, their love, their laughter. He was an extraordinary grandfather. But my biggest gift I got from my father was that he made me feel safe. Always. As long as I had him in my life, from clear across the globe, I knew I was safe and I was loved. Every day, everywhere, wherever was going on, I was loved. This week, I lost my safety net. I lost my father, my beautiful hero. But he will be forever the hero in my heart and soul. And I'll feel his arms around me, making sure I will never fall. With his eternal strength, I never will. My father held me when I came into this world. And this week I have the gift, the blessing, and the honor to be able to hold my hero as he left this world. They say that a hero's strength is measured by the size of his heart. Then I salute my father, my heart, my hero.
Jamie.
Jim Rubin was a giant of a man. Tall, dashing, gregarious, hailing from New York originally as a lean, studly basketball star. As fortune would have it, a family from Mayfield Heights, Ohio, happened to be moving into a new town of Beechwood, looking for a new home. And his lovely sister, Joan, and her husband, Henry, happened to help us out to find the perfect one on Bryan Drive. Although I don't know the details of what happened next, I believe Joan tipped off my mom about this superstar brother, James Rubin. I am totally positive that Jill and I, from the beginning, were very welcoming. We initiated our family with a great cruise to the Caribbean. We dubbed it the Love Boat. And Elizabeth and my sister Jill, I'm not sure what they did, but they were the party of the boat. And Michael and I had our time too, and we ran laps around the boat and ate turtle burgers in the Bahamas. Living with Jim was awesome. He was a master chef. He could grill stuff that was unbelievable. Flank steak, burgers, dogs, all ready, all different temperatures for a very picky family. And our family dinners were awesome, and it was very important that we were all there and Jim was there preparing everything for us. Jim was also an awesome driver from his days of scouting out real estate in Chicago and Cleveland and New York, and he would drive us everywhere, very calm. He drove us to Florida. He drove us around the country, and every now and then he'd occasionally let us turn off the elevator music that was constantly going. My mom, Jim and Janice, traveled the world together. They're a wonderful couple. And from that note in Israel that the rabbi mentioned to their introduction from Joan, they had a wonderful 33 years together. Disney cruises, Caribbean cruises, riverboats, Vietnam. I'm not quite sure how they did that one, but they were strong, and Jim was strong, and Jim carried a lot of weight and a lot of strength in his family. On the golf course, as many of you know, Jim was a master. He would always take me out, and I'm sure we'd play for a couple dollars a hole. And to be honest, in all those years, I don't think I ever won. For a big giant of a man with a giant heart, he had a deft putting touch, and he'd nail me. I'd outdrive him, and he'd nail me with that one putt. However, he did never ask me to pay all the money I owed him. And I owe you. So I thank you, Jim. Jim was also, as people mentioned, quite the jokester. He had jokes, as many of you know. We had our share of jokes in our family, I'm sure, with all of his friends and family. He had a different set of jokes, and some were good and some were bad, but mostly they were funny. And Jill and I always joked that we were going to make a book of his jokes, and I think, based on what I'm hearing today, we should get some of those jokes together and save them. Most importantly, as you see out here, Jim was an amazing friend. Everywhere I went, his friends loved him so much. He was a warm and truly a gentleman. Wherever we went, whether we went to the country club, to the movie theater, to a party, he was always the life of the party. He really was. He could be quiet, but when he was at the party, he was a gregarious, intelligent, kind, joking gentleman, true life of the party. He had spectacular dancing feet, was smooth and deft on the floor, and I recall him carrying my mom around the floor. I'm not sure she had the swiftest feet, but he made her look great, and they were a beautiful dancing couple. When we went with all of these events and family events, all of his friends and family, expressed how much they loved Jim. Jim was just a loved gentleman and a kind guy. And to each and every one of these individuals, he introduced me as his son. And I want to tell you how much that meant. I'll miss you, Dad. Be free. Have some great rounds up there, Jim.
Jill.
Well, we've heard two amazing speeches about my dad. And guess what? This might not be politically correct. My sister, Elizabeth, a.k.a. Betts, might get mad, but they trumped me. And Jim would like that joke, maybe for the book. Also, people say that, my brother and I, we have distinct personalities, but when it comes down to it, our speeches are almost exactly the same. I'm like, oh my goodness, what am I going to say? But I wrote out something for Jim, and I'm going to read it. And it has a lot of similarities. So I said, it was 1980-something, February 14th, Valentine's Day, when my mom walked into my room and said, "Look, we just got engaged." And I said, "To who?" But I was only kidding. I knew it was the one and only love of her life, Jim. And at that moment, I knew our lives would change forever. And forever for the better, it did. As we proceeded to merge into the Rubin bunch, we all had high hopes as we took off for the Love Boat. Jamie and Michael, Betts, a.k.a. Elizabeth, and Jilly set sail, but it quickly took a little time for that Love Boat to turn into the Hate Boat. Not that we didn't want it to be the Hate Boat, but we all had those different personalities. But when a tropical storm was coming in, and we didn't really have an idea of it, my brother and I wanted to go to the beach, and Elizabeth and Michael wanted to stay on the boat. So we all separated as two families, and on our way back, a big tropical storm came, and Mom and Jamie and I were on a Tinder, and it started to rock and roll. Life jackets flew out of the Tinder, and we thought, oh boy, this is it. It was not a pretty storm, but we ended up making back to the boat, and the first one waiting there with open arms and a drink, nice cocktail, was Jim. And at that time, we were officially a family. We have all been together through thick and thin, ups and downs, travels, many roads, cruises, birthdays, holidays, Thanksgiving, and always cherishing our times together. The love of his life are his 3 beautiful grandchildren. Lucas, his firstborn, and the original to call him Big Papa, came. He was his best friend and the love of his life. And then the girls, first his beautiful Natalia, and then his baby girl Juliet. And each one he loved with his whole heart. He loved and cherished each one of us. Papa loved to tell jokes. You've heard all his jokes, and I think Jamie and I are going to get on his book, and Michael and Betts. And he was the first one to make all of you laugh and smile. He was a true, as you heard, gentleman, but a real gentle man. We love you, Papa. We will miss you, but you will be with all of us, living in our hearts. We love you, Dad.
Michael.
Sometimes I've been to funerals where people thank the people that took care of their family member. I kind of want to give a little credit to my own family. Jamie, my stepbrother, who would never, unless you asked what he did, he wouldn't volunteer that he's a doctor. He lives in Cedars-Sinai. He's an emergency room physician. And when my dad got sick, he and Janice would communicate on the phone. She would send him notes on his condition, the medications that he was on, how much they were giving him. The questions to ask the doctors, the questions to ask the nurses. So he spoke to me, he spoke to Jill, Elizabeth, and really cued us in on what was going on, so we had a good sense of comfort that my dad was being taken care of. You've heard a lot about my dad's sense of humor, and I thought to myself, this is my dad. He was funny, but this is also a eulogy and a time for respectful mourning and reflection. And it was very important. A lot of you who knew my dad well over 15 or 20 years also knew my Aunt Joan Lefkowitz. They were twins. Not a lot of people know that. And my dad was born with a sense of humor, and they were born 20 minutes apart. And my dad said he had to wait because she was finishing her makeup. So. My dad's sense of humor, again, he could make someone laugh. If they didn't laugh, there was probably something wrong with them. He could make a baby smile, and if the baby didn't smile, well, the baby had problems. If the only person who he made cry was the owner of a BMW dealership. My dad, when I was 7 years old, and 7 years old, whether you're 7 or you're 13, as a child, you're always right. And of course, your parents are always wrong, and they did something wrong. So when I was 7, I decided to run away. And, and my dad, a little reverse psychology, said, well, let me help you. And we put together, you'll need some thermal socks. Take this winter coat. I think he gave me a Snickers bar, whatever. And it was dark out. He said, it's better to go when it's dark because there's nobody out. You can get away with anything, go down any street. So I go down University Boulevard, go down our driveway, and I stop at the end of the driveway. And I've got this little stick. I look like Huck Finn or whatever. And I'm standing there, and it was a snowdrift about 2 or 3 feet high, and I'm kind of peeking out over it. And I look to the side down that way, and then I look to the side of the street down that way. And I'm standing there for about 5 minutes, and I turn around, and my dad are, hi, come on back. As you've heard, my dad loved to eat. His attitude, he and I were both a little heavy. But we go out, the two of us, he would have a good time. Burgers, fries, steaks. One of our favorite places to go was Alexander's. And he would eat burgers. He'd get this big basket of fries, whatever they get. And when he had one fry left on his plate, he would call over the waitress or the server. And this one fry was undercooked. And he had a serious look on his face. And then he said, just kidding you, and because you figure, oh, he's going to ask for the manager now. And at the end of the meal, he asked for a blank check. Dad loved people, and people loved him, and this is one of the things I'm most proud of. Whether it was Alexander's or 4th of July weekend at Beachmont, I remember they had a picnic, and there's a long pool. Everybody's got their name on the tables. And we had the worst possible table. I don't really go to Beachmont that often, but a table next to the tennis courts, way in the corner. And when people saw Dad, they didn't just, hey, they made their way to the table. They went out of their way, probably tripped over somebody else, but they made their way to the table. They wanted to sit down with him, talk with him, hear something funny. It was kind of like Don Vito Corleone, at a wedding. You just go up and you say hello. Lastly, his career. He was born middle class, worked very hard to put himself through college, and his work ethic. He went to work for a company, he went to work for my uncle in a company called Dover Construction. And then I know in Chicago, back in the late 50s, they were building these subdivisions, which really weren't around yet. And an average starting cost was about $13,000 for a nice home. He then moved to Cleveland, and he worked for a company called Developers Diversified. And this is where I might cop a little bit of an attitude. My dad built that company. He went to work when they only had 4 employees. The owner of Developers Diversified, an accountant, a lawyer, and my dad in a sales capacity. As my sister said, he always did the right thing. He was known for building Kmarts. He built about 110 of them. When we would drive down the street, he would say, Michael, we built that, or we built that. And he would say, we. It was never about him, but when I'm 7 years old and your dad's pointing out a big shopping center, a Kmart or a strip mall, or for those of you who are old enough to remember a Zayre, he was just, he was proud, and I thought my dad owned the world. I thought nothing got done without Jim Rubin's approval. So that corporate headquarters on Richmond Road, that wouldn't be standing if it weren't for my dad's first 20 years of his career. I think a lot of you would agree. Right, lastly, that wasn't it. Lastly, getting into heaven. God gave all of us a sense of humor. And as you know, God's work covers everything for all people. He does his magic. I'm not that religious, but when you get into heaven, you go through God. And when he got to the gate, Dad told God he'd build shopping centers on every corner. He would make God a part-time property manager. Thanks for coming. Thank you.
What more could a person ask for than to be remembered in such a way by his children? Friends, I know that so many of you bring your own memories of Jim here with you that you cherish. And so let's pause for a few moments of silent remembrance as each of you remembers him in your own way. And we thank God for the gift of Jim's life and the blessing that his memory will always represent. Our Jewish tradition teaches that we live on in many ways after our physical death. We live on, if we're blessed, with children and grandchildren who carry our very essence in their DNA and who hopefully carry our values and finest qualities with them as they forge lives of their own. We live on in the ways that we change the lives of others for good through our deeds of kindness and consideration, and the way we change the world when people who were impacted by us in turn replicate those qualities and perform such acts in the lives of those with whom their lives intersect. We live on in the causes and the institutions in which we invest our life's energies and which are more important and enduring than our own individual, mortal, sometimes lonely and confused selves. And we live on in the loving embrace of God, whose gift is life and in whose power all is possible. In these ways and more, Jim will always live among us, and his memory will continue to be a blessing. As you're able, we ask you to rise for the memorial prayer, El Malei Rachamim. El Malei Rachamim, Hamtzei Shochen Baramim, Hamtzei Menucha Nechona Tacha Kanfei Shechina, Im Kedoshim Utahorim Kazohar Harakia Mazirim, Et Nishmat Yakirenu Shehalach L'Olamo, Bala Rachimim Yasti Rehu Beseter Kenafav L'Olamim, V'Yitzor B'Tzor HaChayim Et Nishmato, Adonai Hu Nachalato, V'Yenoach B'Shalom Al Mishkavo, V'Nomar, Amen. Compassionate God, eternal Spirit of the universe, grant perfect rest in your sheltering presence to Jim Rubin, who has entered eternity. O God of mercy, let him find refuge in your eternal presence, and let his soul be bound up in the bond of everlasting life. God is his inheritance. May he rest in peace, and let us say, Amen. Friends, please be seated. Our service will continue shortly at Mayfield Cemetery, and those who wish to accompany the family as we take his remains to their final resting place are cordially invited to do that. Friends will be received this afternoon following the interment, and Monday. Today, the guests will be welcomed at Beachmont Country Club on Chagrin Boulevard in Orange, and Monday at the residence, which is at the Hamptons in Beechwood. We'll be reading Jim's name on the memorial list of the Temple Tifereth Israel at our Friday evening services for the next 4 weeks. Those services are at 6 p.m., and all who wish to join us in worship and remembrance are warmly welcome to do so. Thank you for being here for this sad but important and we hope inspiring occasion.